installment number 4, ne? It's 4 or 5? 4. Oh. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Kelvin on Athol episode number 4, Our Story. We continue the journey with a discussion on Adventist Black history. We have been touching a number of subjects, and today we really want to focus on something else. Before we start, though, I'd like to read a statement. This statement was a statement by Nkosi when he was being expelled at Thula on the 1st of May in 1972. And he was addressing the statement to Professor Boshoff, who was the rector at that time. And he says, I quote, "For we can do nothing against the truth, but for the truth." So, we've titled our chat this afternoon to Speaking Truth to Power. Bamgos, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, as you can hear, we're talking about speaking truth to power. What is it about Adventists and this concept of truth, which seems to pervade their thinking and their mindset so much?
I think you're asking a question about a major issue in the whole epistemology and mission programs of the church. Because beyond America, the missionaries did things that even Ellen White would not have sanctioned. They carried first what was called shorter Oxford logic that had come from England, unofficially into the creation theory of a doctrine of the church, that blacks were inferior to human beings, to whites, and that they could have, well, they would not have said we came through evolution, but they treated us as lower beings when they came to the mission field, which is why we have never stopped being a mission field to white people. I don't care about the nomenclature we use about conferences and unions and whatever. We're still a mission field. We can't generate our own income. We can't build our own institutions with our own resources because we don't have the wherewithal to build those institutions. And we still, we're worse now that people have influxed into South Africa from countries north of us whose traditional spirituality cannot tackle the context of South Africa. Some of us are even arguing now that we need a South African division and do away with the current division because it's led by foreigners who don't know where we come from. I might be saying something shocking, but it lies within my conscience that we need a South African division office, run and staffed by us, because it will then speak to the context in which we are. But finally, I want to argue that the black church in South Africa needs a new rebirth. It needs a closed conference. It needs to discuss who it is and who it wants to be, and its context. For instance, it is clear with the present churchmanship that we have that we'll never arrive at doing productive urban mission. Even while many of us live in urban areas, we have got a rural model of evangelizing South Africa.
The context, obviously, the prelude which we are talking about right now will lead us to continuation of our discussion last week on how the black church responded to the various changes in the South African landscape. And we spoke last week about the memorandum movement. And one of the people there was a gentleman called Nkosi Abraham Tiro. In fact, there's a latest book of his here. It's a book by one of his kin, Khaungalelwe Tiro. It's a brilliant book, really, which captures the history of who the man was and what he's all about. It's something I recommend all of us should read about. But, Bamkos, you had, so to speak, a front row seat in the life of Tiro, especially in the light of the movement, of the memorandum movement, and later on also just before he went on across to Botswana.
Yeah.
What is it about Tiro which you can actually say in your mind captures your imagination about the man?
Fine. Let me go back a little, how the memorandum movement evolved.
Sure.
I was invited to the Meadowlands Church in April by the late Abraham Sekhapan, who was the elder then.
Yes.
I lived with my brother in Lamini too. He came to me, we had known each other in STASA conferences, and he said to me, man, I would like you to come to our church, and did not prescribe the topic. At that time, I just finished reading The Middle Wall by Cleveland,
yes,
who was at the GC and later worked at Oakwood University, where he was dealing with issues of racism in society and even in the church. I'd also gone through, for the second time, the book, The Great Advent Movement by Emma Howell. Because I was sensing that I was now in a new territory. I just arrived from KZN. I needed to reposition my life within the context I was seeing. And I then discovered that it just came to me that our church was a colonial movement. And we needed to expunge the debt in it. I then framed my topic in a lecture form, the state of the Adventist Church in South Africa.
Okay.
I was not intending to preach. I was merely intending to share ideas and perhaps arouse the conscience of the church. That, I think it was the second Sabbath or third Sabbath of May, 1972. That sermon became very rough on me because midway through the sermon, I saw people shedding tears, elderly people. Pastor Ololoane was there, Babu Mati, Mhlanga, and a number of others who had led in the memoranda, in the layman's movement of 1952-1963.
Yes.
And I could see that I was touching raw nerves because all the movements in South Africa don't end in a fine conclusion. They are confronted by the system in the church, and they dissipate. Yes, but you get people feeling something wrong was done to us. But what can we do? We're in the church, we're God's people, and so on. So as I spoke, I felt I'd aroused an interest. But the sermon ended, and later on, Sekhapan came to my place. At that time, I was living with my aunt in Orlando West Extension. He said, man, look, something has happened. We need to do something about this. No, I'm wrong. I was still living with my brother. I lived with my aunt later on. And then Sekhapan told me, your sermon has agitated interest. Then there was a funeral in Zone 4 Meadowlands. I attended the funeral. Guys crowded around me and said, hey, you left us wounded. Ulalone literally came to me I know you from childhood. Because he had pastored in Dundee earlier on. And do you know what you did in Meadowlands? I said, I don't know. A day later, then Sekhapan said, we're calling a meeting.
Because we covered this ground last week with your meeting, for example, how you actually ended up to cover the meeting. I want us now to speak more about the role which you believe, for example, was played by Ubabu Utiro on that era.
At that time, TEFLOP was in turmoil.
Yes.
Yeah. TEFLOP was in turmoil. And very few of us knew that Tiro, first of all, was an Adventist and that he had relatives in Soweto. It was one of those uprisings in the country against apartheid. the movement on the 22nd, I think, but late in May 1972, about 20 to 30 men met in the classroom next to the office in Orlando West School on a Sunday.
Yes.
The pastor who lived in the mission house was Pastor Silaledi.
Okay.
I was asked, AB chaired the meeting. I was asked to give those who were not in Zone 3 a summary of what had happened. So I gave the high points, and a decision was made that a broader meeting should be called. Then a broader meeting was called, more people came in. We never made a decision that women should not be invited, but somehow it became a men's movement. But later we were to talk to everybody. I'll come to that part. And the brother then made a decision that these things should be documented. Pastor Lolwan was there, Mapila. I'm not sure of other pastors, but I do. Oh, Ntwana was there.
Yes.
But late Pastor Ntwana was living in the home of Ndate Masipa in CWJ. And these people then spoke based on their experiences in the ministry. And a decision was then made that Tiro, Ntwana, and I should prepare a document.
Yes.
That's how the memorandum was born. The memorandum was written in the home of Srapane by his wife, Figile. We talked about this last week. We then went to Pastor Masego, who was the district director. He said, because this thing comes from youth, please go to the youth department. And that's how we landed at Pastor Silaledi.
Okay.
When he discovered that this was too hot a potato, he said, please go to the office. At that time, the TOC office was in the tabernacle.
Okay.
So John was the president. We first sent him a copy, and we made an appointment. We honored the appointment, and he complained about the fact that the English was higher than what he could handle. The issues were tough, and he was beyond the issues in terms of constitutional power and so on, and that perhaps it must be referred to the union. Of course, the union had already received copies. We sent copies to all these structures of the church. Dira and I had printed the memorandum in a print room in Morris Isaacson. And then we called meetings in the hall, the double classroom in Orlando West. Somehow people caught fire. This whole thing caught fire. Almost every district around Johannesburg became interested in this thing. We ultimately then embraced membership into the memorandum executive committee from the East Rand. Ubabu Bakoso was a member, but Edwin Meko was a member. I think there were two other persons. I'm not sure if we brought anybody from the Golden West district. Yeah. We did not find very favorable reception in Pretoria. Pretoria is another mindset. We came out with the impression that we were viewed as these troublemakers from Soweto or Johannesburg. Yes, yeah. I remember one time there was a youth gathering in Hammanskraal where Pastor Silaledi spoke. Yes, yeah. We were not there to talk. He was the host of the meeting. But we marked one thing that really bothered us. He argued that Ellen White's book, The Southern Work, had also actually been written by us and not by Ellen White. We looked at one another and said, look at this. Which way are we going with this type of pastors? Yeah, and then in October, we traveled to Cape Town. The guys in Cape Town picked up story. People who were here phoned Cape Town and said, hey, there's a fire here. And we traveled. We used the first type of what were those? Those kubis from Japan.
Oh, the high aces.
Yes, yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
It was the car belonged to Babu Mtia.
I remember.
Yeah, we traveled in that car. No one knew where we were, and we arrived at Cape Town just after the service. We had a puncture on the way, but we fixed it. And we found all the men in that district gathered in the church in Gwalanga. Of course, the architecture is different now. The meeting, what shocked us was that around 8, the sun had not set. We said, guys, what's wrong with our watches? I was experiencing that for the first time.
Oh, yeah,
I wondered why there was such a late evening. It gave us time. Then we laid our issues bare. They asked questions, and Then they decided to develop their own memorandum because they were also going to a session. And in PE, they presented the memorandum. I have not met Uvanyaza. I don't know if he's still alive. Uvanyaza was one of the spearhead of the movement within the Cape, yes. And I don't think they even adopted the name we were using. In fact, for your information, we never called ourselves a name. The name Memorandum Movement was imposed on us because we had written a memorandum. Okay. Yeah, we didn't want to be called by name because we didn't want to be victimized. You know, people can club you, and give you a label, and then go around lashing those. Yeah. So ultimately, Tiro, what then happened was the field then just fossilized in the presence of this thing. The union called us to a meeting on the 10th of December. The division was represented. I don't know how many people came from the division. Oh no, I think I do know. There was a young man they called Winifred. I think I have his name somewhere. Okay. But I've forgotten his name. I may come back to that name later. But in the course of the deliberations, we brought the committee plus extra people who would support us. Elder people. I remember Lolo was there. He almost gave a slap to one of the pastors there, because each time we spoke, that pastor kept making strange noises against us, pleasing his bosses at the union. Lolo then turned aside and said, "Fundis Manban, Zagbeta." You know, it was such a big joke, subdued joke. Yeah, and they then called people from the Cape and elsewhere, pastors who were educated, black pastors, young pastors who were educated, to support their move. And at one time they asked one of them if he was happy with his salary. He said, "No, I don't have a problem with the salary." No, it was a very, very nasty meeting. Whites imposed their bare authority on black leadership that we respect and then embarrassed them. And a signal event took place there when this man representing the division asked the whites at the union. He said to them, "You can see that these people no longer need you here. Why do you want to stay when you are no longer needed in this union?" There was dead silence, and he insisted.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because...
And for that, 2 months later, he was removed from the division.
Funny enough, because that's exactly what Tiro was saying, actually, in his address at the 1972 graduation.
Yeah.
Because exactly he was asking, if you say this is for blacks, why are you still here?
Yes,
why are you even at TEFLOP? So I think to him it was deja vu because he was now experiencing that also within his church setting.
Actually, Tiro argued. I remember we were eating somewhere. Tiro, by the way, was a vegetarian.
Yes.
Who despised people who were not vegetarians. He would call them. He would say to them, "You're eating field diet. I'm eating GC diet." Okay. Makes such jokes. Yeah. So he then says. He then said to us in a committee meeting, he has come to realize that if we remove racism from churches, it will disappear from politics. He argued very strongly that if we cleaned churches of racism, it would have a serious impact on society. That's why I spend more time with us. Even when Sasso guys came to fetch him, sometimes say, "No, today I have a meeting with those guys. They come first. You can get other guys to do things." Then we knew now that we're being followed because he was around. We even saw strange people in our meetings in Orlando. Men I've never seen again. And guys who would not even ask questions. You know, a guy would just look at you with a stern face and you wonder, can I talk to this father or this guy? Who is he? Which member, which church is he? And they were tracking him, but they were also tracking the rest of us. And at that time, I did not know that some of our members had been in movements before of a political nature. So So then the session arrived in Davidton.
Yes.
Early 1973. Tiro had not been at home. The church in Didokana sanctioned him to be the delegate for Didokana. The pastor of that church did not know.
Yes, I remember.
He then questioned his
membership.
Credentials, yes. And post that session, which was very rough, Pastor Sojola could not handle the session. The division had to go up and chair the meeting because he faced questions he had never thought of in his life. We're actually using him to bounce questions to white people. We're dealing with white people. But because he was the wall, we had to throw the ball at him. And one interesting thing that happened there was that each time whites walked out of the building, guys would follow them. When they was going to the toilet and so on, to thrash him. One man even cried there, stood up. A former treasurer of the union said, I've lived in this country for some time. I've said it, I never knew that I was a professor. I was an oppressor. Didn't people laugh? Say, how could you not know that you're an oppressor? Incidentally, he was then transferred to he moved from here and went to the GC. Worked in the Treasury Department of the GC.
Now, this is the beginning of 1973, just before he left to Botswana.
So, Tiro now is busy in the church, is busy in the world, and so on. He's become popular. People were getting into taxis in Soweto, young men, claiming that they were Tiro because the taxis don't know, taxi drivers don't, and they didn't pay any fares.
Yes.
And Tiro had this story that, well, if people can liberate themselves from fares, why can't they go for the bigger issues?
Yes.
It was a joke to us. And what then happened was that I got close to Eric Mlobi.
Yeah, because Tiro and Eric also were part of the movement.
Yes,
the memorial movement.
They'd not known each other. They then met outside of the church, in another context. Okay. But I discovered that Eric had found a home in this movement.
Yeah, because I mean, Eric Molobi, we do know obviously from the Dube Church point, because he was once an elder at the Dube Central Church. Yeah. So we do know of him. But yeah, actually maybe let's talk about Eric and also Tiro.
Yes.
And your relationship with them.
Right. I was living in Meadowlands at that time. I was living in the home of somebody I won't mention now. That person felt that because I had, in his thinking, I should have supported a different group within the church. He felt I'd become a nuisance. He did not tell me to leave. I then decided, no, perhaps it's time for me to leave. And I lived with the Lolwanes in Kilane. Later, I left and then went to live with Sidney Zwane, who's just gone dead recently, in Zone 4 Meadowlands. And that's where Tiro joined us. Very few people knew where Tiro lived during the night. He would come late in the evening and leave early in the morning to evade
being followed, yes.
Which is also the reason why when he left, he came to me. The week he left, came to me. We stood just outside of the London West Church, and he had wrapped a pair of trousers on his left leg, left arm, because he was taking it to a dry cleaners in town. And he then said to me, "Look, I'll be leaving South Africa. You remember I was in Lesotho for a student conference. We formed a Southern African student movement, which would embrace the SADC region. And because of that, he was then instructed that he should relocate to Botswana, because there was no way that movement could take root while he was being surveilled by the security police. So he left. Then he wrote me a letter, which I read twice. He did not tell where it came from. I knew it came from him. He had written it by hand, and I then tore it after reading it twice and bent it, because I noticed that the edges were sealed with tape. I knew that the police had opened the letter and read it. Which is why when they came to my aunt in Orlando West, they looked for that letter. They didn't find it. Yeah. because I think they wanted to use it against me and so on, furthering the aims of a band organization. Fine.
That was in 73.
This is 73 now,
Yes.
after the session.
Yes.
Tiro is gone. I did not reply because I
Yes,
didn't know where he was.
Yes.
I only knew on the first Friday of February when I was told that in the evening that Tiro had been bombed.
Because it's the Tlakwane brothers actually who first heard of this.
I should think so in Soweto because
Yes.
they're cousins.
Yes.
Yes.
And then they drove through.
Yes.
Together with Ubabu Eric
Skapane.
Mulobi. It was Mulobi.
Eric was there, yes.
Yeah, Eric and the Tlakwane brothers, yes.
Yeah, because I picked from him. Eric and I went to Tiro's mother. She was working in some
Parktown, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we went there. I've never seen a woman weep the way she wept. Even today, when I look at the picture of this woman in the book here, I feel what she felt because I suspect Tiro was her only child. I'm not sure. And she had a hope that this boy, after getting his degree, would give him financial support. Life became uncomfortable for her in that job when whites discovered that he had given birth to a revolutionary. And I learned later that that's one of the reasons why he had to leave. One of the things I observed in retrospect was that some of the guys we were working with were already involved in other political movements. And they were using the movement to advance broader goals within the church.
Yes.
I only discovered this through a relative who, in KZN, who phoned me and said, "Are you aware so and so are with us in this type of things?" I said, "No, I was not aware. We're innocently moving whites out of our union, but we are not looking at any other thing."
Okay, I can maybe zoom in on this one, especially on Babu Mlobi.
Yes, I'm coming
Eric
to you.
Mulobi. For those who do not know, Eric Mulobi is one of the founder member of KIT.
Yes.
Which is Kagiso Investment Trust, and in fact, a long-standing member of the ANC who was sentenced in 1970, I think 74, 75? 75 to Robben Island for 11 years, together with Nelson Mandela. Yes, so...
Right. Let me finish the Tiro story and then come to Eric.
Yes.
What's this thing I wanted to say about Tiro? All right, I may remember. Let me get to... Okay, here is the story. Post his death, some Adventists started spreading rumors about who could have been part of the assassination.
Okay.
I became the obvious target.
Okay.
And all these years I've known that people have been thinking that I was part of the assassination of Tiro.
Okay.
Some years ago, I was in one of the churches in Soweto. A close relative of Tiro, actually a cousin, came to me and said, "You know what, we've been hearing stories, but I just want to tell you now, we've ultimately found the truth that we've been suspecting. We didn't want to come to you because we were sure you were not part of the story, but we didn't know what to tell you. Now we know. 4 close relatives were hired by the security system in Bophuthatswana. Well, in the venue of the recruitment was in Bophuthatswana, Mafikeng primarily. These guys were his relatives. And they could have been given money. And the bomb was delivered in the post office of Gabironi by these guys. And the rest is history. Some of his relatives have come to me and told me in the last 10 years that we've heard that you were part of the plot, but we never believed it. And here are the reasons. But now we know this. Fine. I can't divulge the information because this Black Consciousness movement is on a hunt now through files in the state for the guys who issued the command.
Okay.
So they told me information. I actually met the fellow Vodwe. I was coming from Petersburg. We met somewhere in a garage, and he told me, "We knew all these 4 stories, but we didn't want to bother people because we didn't have the truth." Okay. So Azapo is now looking for the guys who gave the command.
Okay.
Yeah. Tiro is the only one, is one of the among cases that, one of the cases that that has not been completed by was never completed
No,
by
it
TRC.
hasn't
Yes,
been,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. The guy who wrote this book is Tiro's niece.
Yes.
He grew up, I think he was born after Tiro had gone.
Yes.
The information he found about Tiro within the church was in the Solusi library. He went to study theology at Solusi. He told me when he lodged this book, and he said, we know, Tina, who killed him. You are the most innocent guy here. But we just wanted to, some of us were too young to be talking to you about this thing. Yeah. So I'm personally walking into the future with a story, but with my conscience very clear.
Now let's talk about another story again with Ubabu Umlobi.
Yes.
Because obviously in case of Ubabu Umlobi, you were called as one of the state
Witness,
witnesses.
yes.
Yes.
This is what happened.
Yes.
I discovered in the course of the movement that his parentage, particularly his father, had been in another organization in the past. I think he was in the South African Communist Party. I'm not sure.
Sure.
Yes. And that's what made him interested in this. I also discovered that he was more politically informed and involved than me.
Mm.
I was primarily a member of the movement out of moral concern, more than political concern.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, I've always been convinced that whites will not leave Africa. They've dug too deep. We're not going to, unless we hate them in some way. But what is that way? I don't know what it is. Because they've never left any place at any rate. Yeah. So, because I was close to Eric, the whole family, they thought I was part of his movements. I'm not going to disclose what he was doing.
Okay.
It would be unethical.
Sure.
Even though what he was doing outside of the memorandum movement was a valid program.
Okay.
Yeah. But I can't disclose it here.
Yeah, we do know that he was a cadre of the movement, obviously.
That's
so
right,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
that's
The broad
historical
term,
now.
yes, yeah. I mean, I never knew that until I was arrested. Till I was arrested. How did they get to arrest me? I think they'd known we were together in the movement, but at the same time, they could have found some book that had my name in his library, which was a book about history generally.
Yeah, I know it's the book about uprising in, I think in South America. I don't remember. I remember now.
Yeah,
the
I can't remember the book. Yeah, so I didn't know. So they get home. They get home one afternoon. It's strange how things happen. I left school early that day, just feeling I must go back home. I didn't know that I was going into an arrest. So I then undressed. I went to the toilet. As I was in the toilet, came out of the toilet, I see a tall black man from, I think he lived in Netherlands, saying, Darse. I wondered, he's pointing at me, but for whom? Then I went to the house, peeped through the window, and found about 8 police cars on the road. And the policemen immediately walked in. They went through my encyclopedia, books. I think they were looking for the letter.
Okay.
They never found it. They then found an envelope, a white envelope, that had an opening at the edge that I'd never read. This is what had happened. In February that year, Eric had asked me to type something for him, which he distributed in Soweto. Our names did not appear there. I only learned later that he printed the same copy in November of the same year, November, October, and distributed somewhere in town around Faraday and so on. One of the recipients was a policeman dressed in private clothes. Took it to John's Foster. That's how we got arrested.
Okay.
Yeah. Then they tracked him. Oh, the policeman went to some boys and asked them, how does that man look like who gave you these papers and so on? Okay, he left them with some boys. That's the story that I was told. And the boys passed it to people, the pamphlets to people. The second version, the second print in which I was not involved. I then learned later that the contents of the envelope was a letter in which he was asking me to help him with the printing again.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that perhaps that in terms of law, that's what could have saved me from arrest. So the evidence I had to give related to how we printed the paper, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just wanted to find out.
I also knew that they'd been looking for him for other things,
Okay.
which did not have anything to be. So yes, thank you very much, Mandla.
Okay. Well, we are with Nkosi here. Nkosi, later on, I would like you to maybe tell us more about the response of the GC to the letter, of the memorandum.
Memorandum, yes.
Yes. But maybe on closing the issue, Babu Umlobi. When Babu Umlobi was actually finally arrested and sent to Robben Island,
Yes.
interestingly, the union sent a letter to the Dube Central Church asking their church to disfellowship him, just by the way.
I never knew that.
Yes, so that is just by the way.
That is sad.
Yes, that's what happened. Now, I wanted to talk more also about. I'm going to move on to the Diaco period now, the 1986. Can we just maybe talk more about Diaco? Because this is 1985-86.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm in the East Rand at that time, and I hear that some younger guys have gone back to Wachun of the 70s. I didn't want to be involved. First, because I'd been marked in the church. Two, Maheti and I were planning that little book.
Yes.
God or Apartheid.
God or Apartheid.
So we
yes.
didn't want to be confused with the movement in Soweto.
Yes.
Fine. Even though we published 3 years after it had, 5 years after it had ceased to exist formally, even while its spirit was still on. So, members of Diaco, Seventh Adventist Youth Committee, were Victor Mdluli,
Sabelo
Bacela,
Zolani Skolo, Tamis Skolo.
Yes.
What was his name? And Pumlani. I remember I was
Pumlan.
Yes, I was part of I was there in the formation of the group.
Okay.
I was part of that because when it was formed, I was there with Chanki Machine. We were all part of that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. What were your goals? We told the questions to you. What were your goals? That's interesting.
Actually, it was exactly the same as the memorandum group.
Yes,
really,
yeah.
The focus was on how to liberate the church from the clutches of of apartheid and white control, etc. But at the time for me, the reason why I never actually continued with it was at the time also when I was about to leave to go to Lesotho to study.
I see.
And obviously, as you can see, that was a very tricky situation. Yes.
By the way, I also discovered between 1984 and 1990 that some of the whites who were in the security system at that time and some who patrolled Soweto as police were Adventists.
Well, I would not
One
be
was a
surprised.
name you know at Bethel, the tall guy.
Who taught us?
Who taught you?
Yeah, who taught me
science,
physical science? Yes, I do know that.
Was part of that, yeah.
Yes.
Let's not call names, man.
We did suspect, with all of the guys who were there, we did suspect, yes.
Yeah.
In fact...
Let me tell you a story, Mandla.
Do you remember Mtoli Kote?
Oh, yes. Very well.
Yes. When Mtoli at that time was recruiting me for his underground movement.
I didn't know that until later.
No, he was already, by the time he went to Bethel, he was already part of the movement. And I remember we spoke in length about him, the man, yes.
Okay. How close were you to Zugo?
I knew Zugo, not very close though.
I am aware Zugo had been in the PAC.
No, I didn't know.
Zugo was arrested for, well, as he told me, and it's a public story, and we became very close. Let me tell you how we became very close. You remember Patko Mafani was the bell ringer.
Yes, I know Patko.
Right. He comes to me, as I was in class, and around lunch he walks to the office and says, look, Nkosi, such a thing has happened. There's a boy in the standard 6 or standard 7 class who has just been picked by police. He comes from my place.
Yes.
Wow, which boy? And he explained the boy, who the boy was. Then I said, okay, fine. I'm going to go to the police station after lunch. Then we drove to Butterworth. I asked the guy who drove me there to stay in the car. I went to the police station. I found a list of some of you guys listed in one of the walls there. I don't know if your name was there, but there were about 12 guys, between 7 and 12 Bethel students listed on the wall of the police station in Butterworth. I pretended I was not reading the list, and then they made me wait for some time. This policeman then came to me and said, "The boy's not cooperating with us. I need to, before sunset, I need to tell his parents whether they are keeping him or releasing him, because I'm an official in the institution." Mtakana was not around. He had gone to a principal's conference in Zimbabwe. So I had to take care of all those decisions. And I said, then this guy comes to me. He says, "Tata, why are you keeping troublesome boys in your school?" I said, "Every boy is troublesome, starting with you. You were troublesome in your youth." And he said, "Okay, fine. But this boy is refusing to tell us where he was before he went to Bethel." I said to him, "This boy comes from the Siskai. What have you got to do with Siskai in stories? He comes from home. We don't know he comes from prison. Yes. He applied to be at Bethel. We can show you the documents. No, do you know this? Do you know where this boy comes from?" "No, I don't. This boy comes from Beaufort West. That's all I know. That's all I want to know." Bob Tole and others had told me where the young man came from. Yeah. And by the way, he was giving a hard time to Mrs. Nia, who was teaching South African history. The boy would tell him the authentic history. I'm telling you, he would raise his hands up and say, "No, ma'am, things did not happen that way. This is what happened." Mrs. Nia had to run on 2 legs in her parade, because there was this boy who was monitoring the propaganda. What she later discovered was just propaganda history that she was teaching in class. So Zugo was in that class. Zugo was in that class, older than the other guys, but he was the most brilliant. Yeah. This is what then happened. We promoted Zugo because he got number 1 in that class. First class, we promoted him twice. He got to matric long before the time he should have been to matric. He's now in the Navy. I think he's a captain.
We are talking about some of the Adventist young men and women who actually form part of the struggle beyond just the church, but into the other areas.
Could I finish the story, Mandla?
Yes.
That Friday, we all went to the chapel in the evening, and was then called to my house. I see this car that I'd seen in the police station. The guy says, "Well, we brought the boy back. He's stubborn. He doesn't want to tell us the truth because of what you were telling me during the day. If you have trouble, don't ask us to help. But we'll ensure that we never come to you because this boy won't give you trouble." He said, "How come?" I said, no, this boy is not going to give us trouble. We will know how to handle him. So from then I sat with Zugo in my room, in my house, and he then told me who he was. I then said, "Look here, I know that type of life. It can be very risky. I'm going to protect you on 3 or 4 bases. 1, you still want an education. Your parents want to see you educated. 2, you are an Adventist. 3, you are fighting a just cause. 4 or 5, you are not fighting against Transkei. You are fighting against South Africa." These guys were informed by the police where you come from that trouble has been planted in the Transkei. So you and I must ensure that you stay in this campus until you matriculate. Zugo is one of those who gave us a first class.
Yeah. Interesting. We are still we're still on Kelvin and Athol Adventist Church. We are busy with our story, tracing the Black Adventist history. Bamgos, one of the people, now that you're mentioning the T-Rose, we're talking about Babum Lobi. I don't know if you know a gentleman called Tiso Libalo.
In Lesotho.
No. Again, from
yes.
Church, yes.
Yes, at Dube, yes.
We had pathfinders together with him, yes.
I think I only spoke with that boy twice in his life over church things.
Yes.
I did not know that he was in the struggle until I was in the strand reading stories in the Sowetan.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, he was actually a normal young man in Soweto, like all of us, and he started working for Umam Winnie when Mama Winnie came back from Brantford into Soweto, and he was actually working for him as his driver, and that obviously meant trouble for him, as you know. And Eugene de Kock and his guys, the flag plug guys, they
did a job on it.
They did a job on them. 5 of them.
Was it the man who was banned?
No, he was not banned. They tortured them, and then they bombed his body 22 times until there was nothing left. And
22 times.
And you know, if you can read, for example, the account in the TRC
report
transaction, it's sad. I mean, and I remember vividly, Mam Libalo, you know, when she was sitting there listening to these stories, it's painful, especially when some people you know. But well, those are the price. That's the price which has been paid, you know. And again, let me just read a statement from Tiro. And he said this just before he was killed to his counterparts. I just want to read this, but because it's a. Oh, okay. What is it? Okay. He said, just before he was killed, he said, no struggle can come to an end without casualties. It is only through determination, absolute commitment, and self-assertion that we shall overcome. You know, I remember in 1984, when you were still a registrar at our school, when we had our first alumni.
Yes.
And you said a statement which said that if you are suffering without succeeding,
Yes.
someone after you will succeed without suffering.
Yes.
And if you are succeeding without suffering, someone before you suffered without succeeding. We stand on the shoulders of these young men who sacrifice not only themselves, but also their lives for the truth. Now, for a church, Babungos, which puts so much premium on truth, why is it that we have not
gone into the full spectrum of truth?
Of the truth, especially when it comes to the social conditions of our people?
Yeah. Mandla, you need to understand the theology of the broad Christian church of the 18th and 19th century, the post-Reformation theology, was concerned with fighting the Pope, fighting Catholicism.
Yes.
And of course, during the missionary era, every denomination had to do as much as it could to win souls in so-called heathen lands, Africa being a major one. So the early Adventist whites, your William Millers and their immediate successors, were not into freedom struggles.
Yes.
That's what makes Ellen White a very significant figure in the history of our church. Perhaps we need another discussion on Ellen White as a freedom fighter.
Yes.
Yeah. We are not going to do that now. But they then come here, and remember, many of them had not been born in the church. Yeah. Many of them had not been born in the church. And so they've got these scruples about a dark Africa with ape-like creatures. Evolution had also crept in to embed the view that the darker you were, the earlier you were in the human scale of evolution. So they come here, they decide their kids will not fall in love with ours because we're a lower breed, we're going to contaminate them. Yes. And those doctrines, even though they're no longer openly expressed, are still the software that influences white behavior in the church.
In fact, what you're quoting actually Peter Wessels.
Yeah.
Is comments to the General Conference when he was talking about evangelizing local people in South Africa. He said that he'd like to work with the black people, but he does not want his kids to socialize with them. He does not want them their blood to mix with the lower caste kind of people. Yeah.
The sad thing, Mandla, on this one is that the white part of the Adventist church has not moved from its Darwinian thinking about blacks. We advocate creationism, but our sociology is based on Darwin. It's a serious contradiction. And I think, in my reflection, we should stop worrying about whites now. We should stop engaging against whites and engage against our backwardness. The black church is a retarded organization. I don't care what you tell me, whether the conferences, these things were given as favors to us because you can't run a field forever. It does not make sense. And also because there were movements that were advocating for conference testers.
I suppose it explains why we have not changed anything once we inherited those structures.
Yes.
We're still operating them exactly the same way they were operated.
And that's also why many of our schools have disappeared. Because one reason why, the major reason why these schools disappeared, they were not academic institutions, they were mission stations for advancing evangelism. That's why most of them disappeared.
So they were not meant to actually advance the interests of
No, they were meant to advance mission and not development. That's why we cannot resurrect Bethel. Because we are caught in that conceptual prison that somebody must do us a favor. We must get money from somewhere. And I think help must now come from guys of your age who are younger than some of us, who have critiqued this thing even from your studies at universities, and who know which way we should go. Otherwise, your generation, your kids are going to insult you.
Nkosi, I think this is a good setup for what we'll be discussing in much more detail next week. Because next week, we want to look at the legacies which we've inherited, first of all, as the black church.
Fine.
And then see, for example, how far we have moved, or if we have moved at all, or we've gone backward, maybe as you say. For example, we'll look at the issues of ownership.
Yes. Of property.
Of property. We'll discuss the issues of SATCOM. We will discuss issues of why we still continue to have black and white conferences in this day and age.
And why whites move when we come in.
Yes, I think those are some of the issues which we'll be dealing with in much more detail next Sabbath. But I think it's very important that you actually raise the mindset and which persists within the church, such that when we discuss these things, we have that backdrop in mind.
Yes. Yeah.
And also, I think one we also will be looking at also is to look at the history of South Africa within the General Conference structures itself, for example. How the changes in South Africa have been looked at by the GC, the mother body, and how they've supported or not supported, for example, the changes happening in the country.
Can I add something?
Yes.
We should do this in order to affirm some of us who raised issues.
Yes.
In the next to, on the margin of the memorandum we sent to the GC, the reader at the General Conference writes on the margin, I don't think they wrote this themselves. They must have been helped by a white person.
That's your response on what the GC said. I know we had a question earlier which asked from, I think it was Ngobile Mashwama, who asked what was the response of the General Conference to the memorandum. You've just heard it there. They don't believe it was written by these black minds. Yes.
We're too inferior to produce the document. Thank you, Mandla.
No,
okay, fine.
Yeah, we're not done yet.
All right,
we're not done yet. Now, Nkosi, what do you say to young people right now who have never heard about this history before?
Yeah.
In their mind, they were so heavenly focused that they were told never to worry about earthly things. They were on this Masihambe. You remember the counter movement. Oh, by the way, you never even mentioned it. The counter movement to the memorandum movement was Masihambe movement.
Yeah. Let's leave that one.
With his famous Maliha. What was that song?
Yeah, it was that type of song.
Yes. What do you say to them?
To the current youth. First, we need to analyze who they are and why those who were born in the church have inherited the type of stuff they've inherited. The fortunate thing about the current generation of black Adventist young people in South Africa, they've been exposed, many of them been exposed to tertiary education. Many are living in a so-called open society. It's an open society, but with closed with enclosures here and there. There are islands that need to be opened for this whole thing to when we fix a wound, we must first explode it,
Yes.
and then heal it. Yes.
Yes.
That's what this church is in need of. Instead of deceiving itself into the future, the South African church will never grow until it speaks truth to itself and admits that what blacks are complaining about is valid. We need a confessional church now, a church that does not fear to read stuff that comes from us, which is not anti-church but anti-injustice. There's this feeling that when you talk against injustice, you're talking against people. Not every white man, by the way, in this country is a racist. That's one thing we need to validate.
Oh, yes,
say.
yes. On saying that, by the way, I will one of these days recount a story of Pastor Skuman, who was a member of the Dube SDA Church in the early 80s, from 1981 right up to 1990. An old man, old retired pastor, who was very instrumental in helping us actually build the church, who would be there every Sabbath in the height of unrest.
Yeah.
Every Sabbath and Sunday, we used to work with him. He was donating his pension money as part of the building fund. That man was way ahead of his time. I don't know what happened to Pastor Skuman, and I don't know where he came from, but he showed us, some of us, a different picture of what is possible when people have been convicted by the truth.
One of my final statements, Mandla, is this. We may not fix whites, but let's liberate blacks. Let's start a movement to be honest with one another, to tell the truth to our children, to work on the basis of God's justice to the human dimension, and then create a developmental missionary program. Because the one we have there is very colonial. Yeah, we bring people into the church, but we do nothing about them. If you can see research done by a relative of mine on what is happening now within the COVID situation, you'll be shocked at what people say. I won't talk about it now because the research was not done by me. But we are still in the 50s. But the irony is that we have gone to universities, we administer institutions, we run companies, we build beautiful churches. But inside these brains and these souls is colonial mindset. Christianity. Yes. And that's why we are worldly wise and church foolish.
You know, there's a statement which is actually captured in this book which spoke to me. It says that freedom is not something that anybody can be given.
Yes.
Freedom is something that people take. And as a people, we are as free as we want to be.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest challenge within the Adventist church. That we still want to be given this freedom. And you do not understand that it's something which we actually have to take.
It is ours.
Yes.
But
to take,
yes.
And you are as free as we want to be. Not as free as someone tells you that you are. But Nkosi, thank you for this discussion today. And like we said, next Sabbath, we're going to deal much more with some of the topical issues which I know troubles a lot of us. You know, the issues which we spoke about earlier, the church's role in supporting or not supporting the issues happening within South African context. We'll talk about the issues of change and how, for example, the change of government, the change of laws has had impact or no impact within our lived experience as Adventists. Because, Nkosi, like it or not, we are South Africans, and this is where we are, and this is our reality.
And this is the territory in which God wants us to apply redemptive mission.
Hallelujah. Thank you very much, and God bless. Please join us next Sabbath.